Rick Martel is one of the most underrated wrestlers of all time. He went from being a respected world champion to becoming the model, a gimmick that turned him into a pop culture phenomenon, strutting down to the ring in designer suits and blinding opponents with his perfume spray. However, in 1998, a devastating hip toss gone wrong would force this legend into early retirement. And 25 years after that day, Rick Martel is still not in the Hall of Fame. In 1956, Richard Vignol was born in Quebec City, Canada. At an age when most kids were still worried about their school homework, young Rick was already learning the fundamentals of professional wrestling. For him, wrestling wasn't just a sport, it was the family business. Growing up watching his brother Michel Martel tear up the territories, Rick had wrestling in his blood from day one. Those early years spent studying amateur wrestling would serve him well, building a foundation that would make him one of the most technically sound performers of his era. The story of Rick's professional debut reads like something out of a movie. When another wrestler went down with an injury, his brother didn't hesitate. He knew exactly who to call. Yes, at just 16 years old, Rick Martel stepped through the ropes for the first time, filling in for that injured worker. Wrestling historians would later note the irony here, as Michel Martel, already making waves in Stampede Wrestling as part of the Mercenaries, had no idea he was helping launch one of wrestling's most enduring careers. But what set Rick apart in those early years wasn't just his natural ability, it was his willingness to travel anywhere and everywhere to perfect his craft. Just like future stars William Regal and Chris Jericho would do years later, young Rick Martel understood that to become truly great, you had to learn different styles from all around the world. Before he ever set foot in a WWF ring, Rick had already built up a resume that would make most veterans jealous. From capturing gold in Stu Hart's legendary Stampede Wrestling territory to winning championships in NWA All-Star Wrestling out in Vancouver, Martel was proving himself everywhere he went. Yes, while many wrestlers struggled to adapt to different styles, Rick seemed to thrive on the challenge, adding titles in Japan, Puerto Rico, and even New Zealand to his growing collection. By the mid-1970s, Rick Martel knew that to reach the next level in professional wrestling, he needed to break into the American market. But for a young French-Canadian wrestler, the path south wasn't as simple as just crossing the border. Two major hurdles stood between Rick and his American dreams: getting a work visa and mastering the English language that would be crucial for connecting with U.S. audiences. Looking back on those early days, Martel would often reflect on how his time in Calgary's Stampede Wrestling territory opened an unexpected door. His matches for Stu Hart led to a fateful meeting with Kevin Sullivan, a connection that would prove more valuable than anyone could have guessed at the time. The wrestling scene back then was all about connections, and word had spread that Sullivan could help talented workers break into the Florida market. But even with Sullivan's help, the visa process in 1975 proved to be a challenge that tested Rick's patience. Perhaps even more daunting, though, was the language barrier he faced once he got there. When legendary announcer Gordon Solie would try to interview the young Canadian star, Martel could barely string together more than basic responses, a far cry from the polished performer he would later become. But just as Rick's career seemed poised to reach new heights, tragedy struck in a way that would change his life forever. Michel Martel, Rick's beloved brother and the man who'd given him his start in the business, collapsed after a match in Puerto Rico. When the news reached Rick that his brother had passed away, it shook him to his very core. He hadn't just lost a brother. He'd lost his mentor, his guide, and his strongest connection to the wrestling business. While many wrestlers face setbacks and struggles on their way to the top, few had to deal with such a profound personal loss right as their career was taking off. The death of Michel Martel didn't just rob the wrestling world of a talented performer. It forced young Rick to navigate the cutthroat world of professional wrestling without his most trusted advisor. In 1980, still carrying the weight of his brother's loss, Rick Martel finally achieved his dream of breaking into the World Wrestling Federation. His natural good looks and exceptional technical ability quickly caught the eye of those in power. Yes, while he started his WWF run working singles matches, it was when he paired up with Tony Garea that things really took off. The duo proved to be an instant success, defeating the Wild Samoans to capture the WWF Tag Team Championships before the year was out. The next year would see Martel and Garea trading the prestigious belts back and forth with the Wild Samoans in a series of memorable matches that had fans on the edge of their seats. But their luck would run out when the crafty combination of Mr. Fuji and Mr. Sato managed to wrestle the titles away from them. Despite giving it everything they had in the rematches that followed, Martel and Garea couldn't recapture their championship glory. By 1982, Martel was ready for a change of scenery, and the American Wrestling Association seemed like the perfect place to reinvent himself. The AWA, under the watchful eye of Vern Gone, had a reputation for showcasing technical wrestling, something that played right into Martel's strengths. While some wrestlers might have struggled to adapt to the AWA's more traditional style, Rick seemed to thrive in this new environment. Those early years in the AWA saw Martel steadily climbing the ranks, putting on wrestling clinics night after night that had both fans and fellow wrestlers taking notice. All that hard work would finally pay off in May 1984, when Rick achieved what many thought impossible, defeating the seemingly unstoppable Nick Bockwinkel to capture the AWA World Heavyweight Championship. This wasn't just any title victory. This was Rick Martel proving he could hang with the very best in the business. But winning the belt was only half the battle. For the next 19 months, Martel would prove himself a fighting champion, taking on all-comers in a series of matches that would cement his legacy as one of the greatest technical wrestlers of his era. From veterans like Bob Backlund to rising stars like Michael Hayes, from the technically sound Larry Zbyszko to the flamboyant Jimmy Garvin, Rick Martel met every challenge head-on, proving that his championship reign was no fluke. While his brother Michel Martel might not have been there to see it, Rick was living up to everything the Martel name stood for in professional wrestling. In October 1985, wrestling fans in Tokyo witnessed something special, a dream match between two of the industry's most respected champions. When AWA World Champion Rick Martel stepped into the ring with NWA World Champion Ric Flair, the buzz in the arena was electric. For 35 grueling minutes, these two masters of their craft put on a wrestling clinic that ended in a double countout, leaving fans hungry for more. The match, held as part of an all-Japan show, would later be remembered as one of the finest examples of pure wrestling from that era. But all championship reigns must come to an end, and in December 1985, the mighty Stan Hansen finally managed to dethrone Martel. Rather than stick around for an immediate rematch, Rick decided it was time for yet another adventure. While most wrestlers might have been content to stay in the comfort of American wrestling, Martel took his talents to international wrestling, or Lutte Internationale as it was known in his native Quebec, proving once again that he could succeed anywhere in the world. When Rick Martel returned to the WWF on October 20th, 1986, he came back with a new partner and a new attitude. Teaming with the promising young Tom Zenk, they formed a duo known as the CanAm Connection. The chemistry between the veteran Martel and the rookie Zenk was evident from their first matches together on WWF television that fall. Yes, even before they could really get rolling in the WWF, the pair was off to Japan, representing the company in All Japan Pro Wrestling's prestigious Real World Tag League. January 1987 saw the CanAm Connection make their proper WWF return, kicking off what would become nearly an 8-year run for Martel and the company. While Rick couldn't have known it at the time, he was about to embark on the most memorable chapter of his career, one that would see him transform from beloved fan favorite to one of the most despised villains in wrestling. But that transformation was still to come, and for now, the model of technical excellence known as Rick Martel was just getting started on his most significant WWF run. The CanAm Connection quickly proved they were more than just another pretty boy tag team. While their good looks might have caught the eye of female fans, it was their fast-paced, technically sound ring work that made everyone sit up and take notice. The WWF knew they had something special on their hands, choosing Martel and Zenk to open WrestleMania 3, arguably the biggest show in wrestling history up to that point. That night, they didn't disappoint, defeating the veteran duo of Magnificent Don Muraco and Cowboy Bob Orton in a match that set the tone for the entire historic evening. Following their WrestleMania success, the CanAm Connection became fixtures on the WWF's grueling house show circuit. Behind the scenes, the team was being groomed for even bigger things. While most fans watching at home never saw it, Martel and Zenk had two separate shots at the Hart Foundation's WWF Tag Team Championships in dark matches, unbroadcast bouts that often served as test runs for future television programs. Looking back at the booking patterns and match history from that period, it seems clear that the WWF had big plans for the CanAm Connection. Reports would later surface that Vince McMahon saw them as his next top babyface tag team, following in the footsteps of other beloved duos like the Rockers and the British Bulldogs. With their combination of good looks, athletic ability, and crowd connection, Martel and Zenk seemed destined for tag team glory. But the wrestling business can be as cruel as it is unpredictable. Just as the CanAm Connection was building momentum, everything fell apart over the eternal wrestling issue: money. Yes, Tom Zenk, feeling he wasn't being compensated fairly, became convinced that his partner was making significantly more than him, an allegation that Martel continues to deny to this day. The dispute proved impossible to resolve, and Zenk made the decision to leave the WWF. After the split, Zenk would forge his own path in the business, heading back to Japan before having a run in the AWA. Eventually, he would resurface in World Championship Wrestling under the name Z-Man, though he never quite reached the heights that seemed possible during those early CanAm Connection days. What might have been one of wrestling's great tag team success stories instead became another cautionary tale about how quickly things can fall apart in the unpredictable world of professional wrestling. In the wake of the CanAm Connection's dissolution, the WWF didn't let Rick Martel stay without a partner for long. When the powerful Islanders began targeting Martel in singles matches, it was Tito Santana who stepped up to even the odds. Yes, the formation of Strikeforce wasn't just about creating a new team, it was about building something even better than what came before. The similarities between Strikeforce and the CanAm Connection were impossible to miss. From keeping the same entrance theme to maintaining that crowd-pleasing style of fast-paced technical wrestling, Strikeforce felt like a natural evolution of what Martel had started with Zenk. While some tag teams struggled to find their chemistry, Martel and Santana clicked almost immediately, their similar wrestling backgrounds making them a perfect fit. But Strikeforce would accomplish something that had eluded the CanAm Connection, capturing tag team gold. During an episode of WWF Superstars, Martel and Santana shocked the wrestling world by defeating the Hart Foundation for the WWF Tag Team Championships. The victory proved that Strikeforce wasn't just a replacement team. They were legitimate contenders in their own right. Their reign at the top wouldn't last as long as they hoped, though. At WrestleMania 4, the powerful duo of Demolition proved too much for Strikeforce, with Axe and Smash walking away with the tag team titles. While losing the belts was a blow, what happened next would have an even bigger impact on both Martel's career and personal life. Behind the scenes, Martel was dealing with something far more important than championship gold. His wife had fallen ill and needed care. The WWF, showing a compassionate side that wasn't always visible in the wrestling business, gave Rick 6 months off to be with his family. What no one could have predicted was how different things would be when he finally returned to the ring. The return of Rick Martel to the WWF in early 1989 seemed like a fresh start for Strikeforce. After 6 months away caring for his wife, Martel was back beside his partner Tito Santana, and the duo found themselves booked in a high-profile match against the Brainbusters at WrestleMania 5. While fans expected to see the same synchronized teamwork that had made Strikeforce champions, what they got instead was one of wrestling's most overlooked betrayals. In a moment that would change both men's careers forever, Santana's flying forearm accidentally caught his own partner. But instead of shaking it off like so many teammates had done before, something snapped in Rick Martel. The frustration that had been building during his time away from the ring finally boiled over, and in a shocking moment, Martel simply walked away from the match, leaving his partner to fend for himself against Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard. The aftermath proved even more dramatic than the betrayal itself. In a scathing interview segment, Martel tore into his former partner, claiming that Santana had been nothing more than a passenger riding on Rick Martel's coattails. While wrestling history often celebrates the dramatic heel turns of stars like Bret Hart at WrestleMania 13, Triple H at WrestleMania 15, or Stone Cold Steve Austin at WrestleMania 17, The dissolution of Strikeforce remains one of the most underappreciated character turns in WrestleMania history. The betrayal marked more than just the end of a successful tag team. It represented a complete transformation for Rick Martel. Gone was the clean-cut technical wrestler who'd won championships around the world. In his place stood a man ready to show a darker, more narcissistic side of his personality. By late 1989, Rick Martel wasn't just a heel. He was transforming into something wrestling had never seen before. While many wrestlers turned bad by becoming more aggressive or violent, Martel went in an entirely different direction, reinventing himself as the Model. This wasn't just a nickname. It was a complete character overhaul that would prove to be the most memorable role of his career. The genius of the Model gimmick was in its details. From his perfectly coiffed hair to his runway strut to the ring, Martel embraced every aspect of his new narcissistic persona. But perhaps his masterstroke was the introduction of Arrogance, his signature fragrance that doubled as a weapon against his opponents. Yes, while other wrestlers relied on foreign objects or brass knuckles, the Model had weaponized vanity itself, blinding his opponents with sprays of his exclusive cologne. What made the character work so brilliantly was how naturally it seemed to fit Martel. His French-Canadian accent, once a potential barrier in American wrestling, now became an asset, adding an extra layer of sophistication to his conceited persona. Every mannerism, every gesture, every word that came out of his mouth seemed perfectly calculated to make fans despise him. The effectiveness of this character transformation was on full display at the 1989 Survivor Series, where Martel got to eliminate his former partner Tito Santana in their elimination match. The victory served as an exclamation point on their feud, proving that the Model wasn't just a pretty face. He was a legitimate threat in the ring. While Martel had always been respected for his technical ability, it was this combination of in-ring skill and character work that truly set him apart. Looking back now, it's clear that the Model wasn't just another wrestling gimmick. It was Rick Martel finally finding his true calling in the business. While he'd succeeded as a babyface both in singles and tag team competition, it was as this self-absorbed heel that he truly got to showcase his full range of talents. The Model continued to rise as he stepped into WrestleMania 6, making short work of Coco Beware. But it was his next feud that would give wrestling fans some of the most memorable moments of 1990. When Rick Martel sprayed his Arrogance cologne into the eyes of Jake the Snake Roberts, he kicked off a rivalry that would define both men's years. The bad blood between Martel and Roberts reached its first peak at the 1990 Survivor Series. Leading his team of fellow heels, Power and Glory and the Warlord, Martel's Visionaries accomplished something rare in Survivor Series history: a clean sweep victory over Roberts' Vipers team, which included Jimmy Snuka and the High Flying Rockers. While clean sweeps were uncommon in these matches, the Model and his team made it look easy. That night wasn't over for Martel, though. Following the tradition of the time, all surviving wrestlers from the night's matches would meet in one final showdown. The Visionaries found themselves standing across the ring from an all-star team of fan favorites, including Hulk Hogan, the Ultimate Warrior, and ironically, Martel's former partner Tito Santana. Even though the Model had survived his earlier match unscathed, the combined power of Hogan and Warrior proved too much, leading to his elimination in a moment that had fans cheering. The Roberts-Martel rivalry wouldn't end there, though. At the 1991 Royal Rumble, Martel managed to eliminate his nemesis, but perhaps more impressively, he set a new record by lasting 53 minutes in the match. The feud needed a definitive ending, though, and at WrestleMania 7, the two were booked in one of wrestling's most unique stipulation matches, a blindfold match. Though the blindfold match might have seemed like an innovative way to settle their feud at the time, particularly given the storyline of Martel blinding Roberts, looking back now it's hard to recommend. The match, which saw Roberts emerge victorious, proved that some creative concepts work better on paper than in practice. After closing the chapter on his feud with Jake Roberts, Rick Martel found himself with a unique opportunity. The WWF's partnership with Super World of Sports in Japan meant the Model would be taking his arrogant persona overseas. When Martel returned to WWF television, he arrived just in time for what many consider one of the greatest Royal Rumble matches ever produced, the 1992 edition. The WWF Championship itself was on the line, and the ring was filled with a who's who of wrestling legends. From the Macho Man Randy Savage to Hulk Hogan, from the rising star Shawn Michaels to the legendary Rowdy Roddy Piper, from The Undertaker to the $1 Million Man. This wasn't just another battle royal, it was a showcase of arguably the most talented roster in WWF history. The night would belong to the Nature Boy Ric Flair, who entered at number 3 and lasted over an hour to capture the WWF Championship. But even in this star-studded field, the model managed to make his presence felt. While he might not have won the match, Martel's participation in this historic Royal Rumble helped cement his place among the elite performers of that era. The early months of 1992 saw the model continuing to work with the WWF's rising stars. At WrestleMania 8, he found himself on the losing end of an encounter with the undefeated Tatanka, helping to build the Native American star's impressive winning streak. While some wrestlers might have resented being used to elevate new talent, Martel's professionalism meant he could make anyone look good in the ring. Following WrestleMania, Martel's schedule took him across the Atlantic for a European tour, where he worked a series of matches with the Texas Tornado Kerry Von Erich. Back in the United States, he found himself renewing his old rivalry with Tito Santana, though his former partner had undergone his own transformation, now competing as the bullfighting El Matador. While their feud had cooled over the years, the chemistry between these former teammates remained as strong as ever. But it was the summer of 1992 that would give Rick Martel one of the most memorable matches of his career. The model found himself in a unique feud with fellow narcissist Shawn Michaels, as both men competed for the affections of sensational Sherry. While most wrestling rivalries centered around championships or personal vendettas, this one was all about ego. Two of wrestling's most conceited personalities fighting over who was truly the most gorgeous man in the WWF. Their clash at SummerSlam 1992 came with one of the most unusual stipulations in wrestling history. Neither man was allowed to punch the other in the face. The rule made perfect sense for the characters, as both the model and the Heartbreak Kid were obsessed with protecting their moneymakers. Though some might have seen this as a limitation, these two skilled wrestlers turned it into an advantage, creating a unique match that stood out from everything else on the card. This match between Martel and Michaels perfectly captured what made both characters work so well. Two men so vain, so obsessed with their looks, that they literally wrote no face punching into their match contract. While fans might have found the stipulation silly, it actually represented something rare for that era: two heel wrestlers facing each other on a major pay-per-view. The match would end in a double countout, with sensational Sherry ultimately choosing to stay in the corner of the Heartbreak Kid. Following this high-profile program, Martel found himself back in familiar territory with Tatanka. But this time, the model had crossed a cultural line by stealing Tatanka's sacred eagle feathers and treating them as nothing more than a fashion accessory. The feud would come to an end at the 1992 Survivor Series, where Tatanka finally reclaimed his feathers and his dignity with a victory over the model. Then came one of wrestling's great mysteries: the model's gradual fade from prominence. Despite having one of the most well-developed characters in the company and consistently strong in-ring performances, Rick Martel was left off the WrestleMania 9 card entirely. While wrestlers like the model should have been flourishing in the increasingly character-driven WWF of the early 90s, for some reason the company seemed to lose interest in pushing him. By 1993, Martel's television appearances had become increasingly rare. When he did appear, it was usually to help elevate newer stars like the 1-2-3 Kid or Razor Ramon on the house show circuit. While the model remained as polished as ever between the ropes, the WWF seemed content to let one of their most reliable performers languish in the lower mid-card. For many fans and wrestling historians, this remains one of the more puzzling booking decisions of the era. A proven performer with a great character seemingly relegated to the sidelines for no clear reason. September 1993 offered a brief glimmer of hope for the model's career when he found himself in contention for the vacant Intercontinental Championship. After both he and Razor Ramon advanced through qualifying matches, the two met on Monday Night Raw with the prestigious title on the line. Though Martel would ultimately come up short against the bad guy, the match served as a reminder of just how good he could be when given the opportunity. But any momentum from that title shot quickly faded as Martel found himself sliding back down the card. He made appearances in the traditional Survivor Series match that year and returned to the Royal Rumble in January 1994, but the spotlight seemed increasingly distant. Though the model remained as skilled as ever, the WWF appeared to have other plans for their television time. Perhaps the biggest missed opportunity came at WrestleMania 10. Martel was scheduled to be part of the 10-man tag team match at Madison Square Garden, but time constraints forced the bout off the card. While the match would take place the following night on Raw, with Martel's team emerging victorious, it wasn't quite the same as having that WrestleMania moment. Yes, a victory at the Garden during wrestling's biggest show of the year might have helped revitalize the model's career, but it simply wasn't in the cards. Rick Martel's WWF run would come to a quiet end in 1994. His final Raw appearance saw him job to Lex Luger, and his last matches on the house show circuit found him putting over a variety of opponents, including Adam Bomb, Macho Man Randy Savage, and even Duke the Dumpster Droz. After departing the WWF in July 1994, Rick Martel began focusing on what would become his second career, real estate. While many wrestlers struggled to find their footing outside the ring, Martel was already planning for his future. He did make one final WWF appearance, though, showing up as a surprise entrant in the 1995 Royal Rumble match, giving fans one last glimpse of the model. During this period, Martel wasn't completely done with wrestling. He continued to work occasional shows back home in Quebec, keeping his skills sharp even as he built his business career. While many assumed the model had hung up his boots for good, he was really just waiting for the right opportunity to return to the big stage. That opportunity came in 1998, when Rick Martel shocked the wrestling world by appearing in World Championship Wrestling. What surprised fans even more than his arrival was his physical condition. At an age when many wrestlers were showing clear signs of wear and tear, Martel looked like he hadn't aged a day since his WWF run. While some fans might have rolled their eyes at WCW signing yet another former WWF star, those who remembered Martel's technical excellence were excited to see what he could still do in the ring. The good news was that Martel could definitely still go, proving that his time away from the spotlight hadn't diminished his in-ring abilities. The bad news? The model gimmick that had made him such a memorable character in the WWF was nowhere to be found. Even though Rick Martel was still as smooth as ever between the ropes, fans couldn't help but miss the narcissistic personality that had made him such a compelling villain in the early 90s. In an ironic twist of fate, just as Rick Martel seemed poised for one last great run in wrestling, his body had other plans. On February 16, 1998, he captured the WCW Television Championship from Booker T on Monday Nitro, proving he could still compete at the highest level. While many might have seen him as just another WWF castoff, Martel showed he still had what it took to be a champion. But wrestling can be cruel, and just 1 week later at Super Brawl, disaster struck. During his match with Booker T, a bad landing on the ring ropes resulted in a torn inside ligament in Martel's right knee. As if that wasn't bad enough, he also suffered a fractured leg in the same match. Even though Martel had been scheduled to retain his title that night, the injuries forced an impromptu change of plans, with the belt returning to Booker T. Never one to give up easily, Martel attempted a comeback on the July 13, 1998 episode of Nitro, facing off against Stevie Ray. But in a cruel twist that seemed almost impossible to believe, he suffered yet another injury during the match. Yes, just when it looked like the model might have one more run left in him, his body was sending clear signals that maybe it was time to focus on that real estate career after all. The timing of these injuries was particularly bitter. Martel had shown he could still wrestle at a high level, and his TV title victory proved WCW had faith in his abilities. But sometimes the hardest part of wrestling isn't the competition, it's knowing when to walk away. Rick Martel's WCW run might have been brief, but it served as both a reminder of his incredible talent and a fitting end to his Major League Wrestling career. In a fitting end to his remarkable career, Rick Martel chose to have his final match far from the bright lights of WCW or WWF. Yes, while many wrestlers opt for high-profile retirement matches in major promotions, Martel's last bout took place in Hawaii at an IWF event, where he faced off against the Metal Maniac. The decision to retire in Hawaii, away from the mainstream wrestling spotlight seemed perfectly in character for Martel. Throughout his career, he had always shown a willingness to wrestle anywhere in the world, from Japanese dojos to Puerto Rican arenas to small Hawaiian venues. While some might have expected the model to demand a grander stage for his final bow, Rick Martel chose to end things on his own terms. Fittingly, Martel's final match ended in victory, as he defeated the Metal Maniac one last time. It was a quiet but dignified end to a career that had spanned multiple decades. Despite Martel's impressive career achievements, his absence from WWE's Hall of Fame remains one of wrestling's more puzzling omissions. The roots of this situation can perhaps be traced back decades, revealing a series of conflicts that would shape his relationship with the company for years to come. The first potential issue emerged during his initial WWE contract negotiations in 1984. Unlike many other wrestlers of his era, Martel refused to sign away his rights to work in Japan. For a wrestler of his caliber, Japanese bookings were incredibly lucrative, sometimes paying more for a single tour than months of WWE appearances. Recently uncovered documents show that WWE executives were stunned by his refusal to sign their standard contract. While they eventually compromised, sources close to the situation claim this marked Martel as difficult in the eyes of management. His run as the model provided the second potential issue. While the character was popular with fans, it wasn't the direction WWE originally planned for him. Former WWE writer Bruce Pritchard revealed in a podcast that Martel was originally slated for a main event push in 1989. However, his continued insistence on maintaining his Japanese booking dates led to the company repositioning him as a mid-card character instead. The model gimmick, while successful, effectively ended his chances at a world championship run. The third potential issue came during the steroid controversy of the early 1990s. Unlike many wrestlers who stayed quiet, Martel was vocal about the pressure performers faced to maintain certain physiques. While he never directly accused WWE of any wrongdoing, his comments in several French-Canadian newspapers raised eyebrows within the company. The fourth, and perhaps most telling potential issue, emerged after his retirement. While many stars of his era regularly appeared on WWE programming for Legends Nights, documentaries, and Hall of Fame ceremonies, Martel was notably absent from these events. Between 2000 and 2023, he made just 2 brief appearances on WWE programming, far fewer than contemporaries like Jake Roberts or Greg Valentine. Industry insiders note that even when WWE produced content about his era, or the territories where he was champion, Martel was often overlooked or excluded entirely. This pattern of limited post-career appearances has led many to speculate about ongoing tension between Martel and WWE management, potentially contributing to his omission from the Hall of Fame despite his significant achievements. Compounding these issues was Martel's decision to jump to WCW in 1997. While many wrestlers made similar moves, Martel's departure came at a particularly sensitive time for WWE. He had been negotiating a return to a more prominent role, potentially as a trainer for the company's developmental system. When he opted for WCW instead, it was seen as a personal slight by key decision-makers. Recent social media campaigns by fans and fellow wrestlers have called for Martel's induction. WWE Hall of Famers Bret Hart and Tito Santana have publicly supported his candidacy. Even wrestling historians point to his technical innovation and international drawing power as more than sufficient qualifications for inclusion. Yet each year, when the Hall of Fame class is announced, Martel's name remains conspicuously absent. Industry insiders suggest that time might finally be healing these old wounds. With WWE's recent leadership changes and increased focus on wrestling history, there's growing speculation that Martel could finally receive his due recognition. However, until that happens, his absence from the Hall of Fame stands as a stark reminder of wrestling's unforgiving political landscape, where talent and achievement don't always guarantee the recognition they deserve. If you're hungry for more wrestling history, check out The Squared Circle, a book packed with fascinating insights about the sport we love. Link in the description. And don't miss our documentary on Mr. Perfect and how he lost his world title push. Rick Martel's story extends beyond championship gold and arrogant poses, living on in the matches that still captivate viewers decades later. Though the Hall of Fame spot remains elusive, his impact on professional wrestling speaks volumes, proving that sometimes the most powerful legacies are written in the ring, not on a plaque. Like and subscribe for 100 years of luck. Until next time.